Today on the Big 6 in 60, Iowa knocks out the defending national champs.
Taking down the defending national champion Florida Gators.
Kansas falls to St. John's in the second round.
Kansas season is over after a 67-65 loss to St. John's.
And the Timberwolves take down the Celtics.
The way the Timberwolves won this game is very unlike how the Wolves have won many games this year.
This is the Big 6 in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big 6 in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Iowa Hawkeyes pulled off the biggest upset of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, sending the reigning national champion Florida Gators packing before the Sweet 16. As the 9 seed now faces Big Ten foe Nebraska next weekend, Trent Condon goes over a huge win on Locked On Hawkeyes.
Iowa did many people believed was impossible, taking down the defending national champion Florida Gators, getting the win against them, the second ever victory against the number 1 seed for the Iowa basketball program. And now Ben McCollum becomes just the second coach in Iowa basketball history to go to the Sweet 16 in his first season, joining Dr. Tom Davis. Oh, what a night it is. As always, it is great to be a Hawkeye, but boy, this one feels even greater. Thanks for joining us here as we react to the biggest win in the program since 1999. I don't think it's a stretch to say that, and obviously it has been a long and difficult road for Hawkeye fans, but here we are. You everyday watchers of our program, you know I got the poster of BJ Armstrong, Roy Marble, Ed Horton right over my shoulder. That's where my love of sport began. Not basketball, not the Hawkeyes. Sports in general came from that group of 3 guys and the 1986-87 team. It was an incredible run, ended in the Elite 8 last year. Now Iowa will play for a chance to get to the Elite 8 in that one. Still, I am battling a little bit of a sinus infection here, but I don't care because I am absolutely wired. I could not be more excited. The celebration with my kids and my wife, hopping up and down like a little kid again, and Iowa basketball. I'm sure you've heard me say before, if you joined us before, that Iowa basketball is still the sport that I have the biggest visual, just the reaction, it goes to another level. And I know there's lots that goes into that, but Iowa basketball, I still get the most upset when things don't go well. And during this 27-year drought of not making it to the second weekend of the Big Dance, there's been a lot of frustrating moments. And we've gone through plenty of lows as Hawkeye fans. Just think back of this season and how close this Iowa team has been pulling off some monstrous upsets. A 8-point lead against Purdue on the road. What they did against Iowa State in Hilton. Of course, the game a couple weeks ago against Michigan, forcing overtime against Nebraska, road victory that maybe could have changed the course. And just how close so many times this squad has been against some of the best in the sport. And to finally break through, to do it in that environment in Tampa was just absolutely incredible. That's a road environment. And to do that in that scene against not just anybody, but a team also on paper that was not a great matchup for Iowa. That was a matchup that you knew was going to be incredibly difficult. And what do? Ben McCollum and company put together a great plan. And on the other side, the team executed it. And as we've mentioned throughout the course of this season with this team, this is what you want to see. It can't just be the reliance on one guy. You put it all together. You know you have the guy with the X's and O's and the coaching acumen, obviously, and Ben McCollum. You don't win at any level of basketball if you don't have a high-level basketball IQ like Ben McCollum does. And obviously, we've seen that. And to put it all together and to do that against this squad, the defending national champions, the favorite to come out of the region, and to go in there and not just beat them. It's not a fluky night where you hit 16 three-pointers. You went in there, you out-physicaled them. You absolutely were the better team on the floor. And to hear guys that say that, to hear commentators afterwards, when Charles Barkley is saying that your team was the better one and deserved to win, how great is that to hear? as Hawkeye fans. So many great moments, so many highlights, so many different things to get into. We definitely will here during our conversation today. Absolutely pumped up. I want to start with Ben McCollum, and I want to start with the quote after the kerfuffle, the nearly fisticuffs that happened in the game. Now, of course, Todd Golden looked like an idiot, which isn't a surprise, looking at his background, and probably shouldn't be a shocker there. But that aside, he's out there, and Ben McCollum didn't back down. I love that. I absolutely love that at the moment. I love that at the moment before we saw if Alguero Fuldegaris actually had thrown a punch or not. I still loved it. We're not backing down. We're not going to come in here and get punked. And too many times in the past, during this 27-year drought, we've seen Iowa basketball back down. Iowa basketball not be tough enough. And they were not going to allow that to happen. Florida might got them. Florida might go out there and be the better team. But Iowa was not going to go in there and get punked. And that, I thought, was absolutely a perfect time for Ben McCollum not to back down, to holler right back at him as Todd Golden's looking like an idiot. And, of course, we saw that as Fulgaris. I don't know how, and I don't know why. There's the shot, though. He clenches up the fist, but he's just going after the ball. Absolutely wild, absolutely crazy. But then we go a step further. And then we get to hear from Coach McCollum in the sideline interview during the first half. And he said, quote, "Their people got sensitive. We're just trying to play ball." Again, not backing down. Absolutely perfect. The embodiment of what this basketball program needed. This is the guy that they absolutely needed. Now, have there been times during the course of the year that I get frustrated? Absolutely. I said after the Penn State game, I'm not going to treat it with kid gloves anymore, and I'm going to ask more questions about the reasons that they're doing things. It's not that I thought Ben McCollum was a bad coach, and if that's your takeaway from it, give your head a shake. Come on. Think about things a little bit deeper. There has to be context beside things. And when you talk about things daily, like I do, both here and on the radio, there are going to be things. It can't just be, well, he's smarter than me, and we'll move on, because these shows would be very short, and I don't think you get much out of it. But here we are, and we are going to celebrate. And we are going to celebrate in the biggest way and get ready for this matchup against Nebraska. But before that, we continue to relive it. Their people got sensitive. We're just trying to play ball. Print the t-shirt. I can't wait. I'm buying one. Absolutely. I don't care what company's coming out with it. I'm getting one of those things. Ben McCollum, boom. Absolutely nailed it there. They didn't back down, and in the end, they made the plays to win this basketball game. We got so much to get into here today. A retrospective, I have been waiting for this moment for more than a quarter century. I am an old man with gray hair. I'm in my mid-40s. I was a freshman at the University of Iowa the last time that this happened. I watched the Sweet 16 game at One-Eye Jake's. It's no longer a bar. Love that place, by the way, but it's not there any longer. Here we're going to get another opportunity. I wish One-Eye Jake's was there. Maybe I'd make a return, or maybe making my way down to Houston. But that aside, we have waited 27 years. Let's celebrate. We're going to dive back into this game, talk about some of the big matchups. And as I mentioned leading into this one, the anatomy for an upset, you needed Bennett Sturts to be superhero. He wasn't, but everybody else stepped up in some way, and you have to love that part of this Iowa basketball team. Let's go through a couple of highlight moments that I have here in my notes and take a look through things. Starting back in the first half, Iowa gets off to a solid start in the game, and you could see right away Iowa dictated the tempo. It was something that was incredibly important to do. They had to be able to do that, and now this is the sixth time this season Florida has lost when the possessions are low. When they're under 70 in the game, that's when they have been susceptible to losing. What does Iowa do? They dictate pace. It's not always the most aesthetically pleasing. There are times where take the shot. It's right there. Why pull it out? However, there is a method to the madness. And if you just play this game straight up and each team racing up and down the floor, I don't think it ends with an Iowa victory as it did in this one. Let's go through a couple of the players. Start with Bennett Sturts, and that's normally who we start with. Bennett Sturts was not very good in this game. And it wasn't just the 0 of 9 shooting from behind the arc, though that was a huge part of that. Both when Iowa had a chance to extend the lead at different points, but even as Florida was coming roaring back, he had a couple of looks. Couple in the first half, open looks he couldn't knock down. 0 of 9 from behind the arc. Finished the game with 13 points and 5 of 16 shooting, though did have a late one that was really important as he got a layup to go, I think, to cut it back to a point, if memory serves, at that point in time. Did have 5 assists, and boy, that 5th assist was the big one as Alvaro Fulgueras knocked it down from the corner. What a shot that was from him. Want to talk about Cale Combs. Thought he did a really good job defensively. Also during the second half, Cale Combs, what we saw out of him is both him and the Sturts in the backcourt, their ability to beat that pressure. And for the most part, Florida, this was not pressure to get steals. It was a way to try to speed Iowa up a little bit, get them to take a little bit more time, slow down some of the actions that they do to run clock, and just get them behind the 8 ball a little bit offensively of what they like to do. But both Combs and Sturts were really good in that role, beating the pressure, getting it to the middle at different times just to keep them off balance, and then going back and forth in the backcourt between those two. Really like what we saw out of Cale Combs. 3 of 5 from the floor, missed his only 3-point attempt in the game. Finished, though, with 6 points and 6 assists, and did it with only 1 turnover. And we know just how good that defense is for Florida. I think that said a lot. Without Tavion Banks, Iowa does not win this game. Tavion, I know Alvaro is going to get a ton of credit, as he should, for the game that he played. Without Tavion Banks in the first half, they do not take the lead into the locker room. He was an absolute man in this game, going up a front line of Alex Condit at 6'11", Chinalu at 6'10", and looks like he weighs about 290 pounds, just a monster of a man inside. Thomas Howe, their small forward, he's 6'9", going up against that front line. Tavion Banks did not back down, went into the rim, and was absolutely outstanding. And that's the high-level stuff we've seen at different times from Tavion Banks this season. He finishes with a game-high 20 points. He also finishes with 6 rebounds in the game. Did have an assist, had a steal in this one. In fact, he was the top guy in plus-minus. He was a +6 while he was on the floor. Cooper Koch, talk about the second half when Florida was making their runs. A couple of timely threes, 4 3-pointers in the game for him. Played some good defense also, I thought, inside, both when he was giving up size and girth against guys like Chinalu and against Alex Condon. I thought he did a really nice job defensively. And you talk about a guy that has taken an absolute leap on the defensive end of the floor from what he was a year ago in the limited time we got to see during his redshirt campaign before the injury, and continuing on. Cooper Koch, a huge credit to him. We know that scoring punch and that shooting ability is going to be big. Also had 3 rebounds in the game against that front line. Cam Manuel had a rough stretch. The turnover that he had on the fast break, that was 1-on-2. Then he had one swiped away when he was going in for a dunk. That was a bad minute and a half. But outside of that, another guy that just competed his butt off against this big front line. Have to give a ton of credit to him. Cam, outstanding once again, doing everything that he could. But we go to Alvaro Fulgueras, a 3-pointer that will go down for a long time. And this is even better than Dean Oliver's behind the back pass to move on. I think this might even exceed Kevin Gamble in the shot that sent Iowa to the Elite Eight back in 1987. This one's going to be remembered for a long time because Kevin Gamble beat Oklahoma, beat a team that Iowa was seated higher than in that one, though a very talented Oklahoma team back in 87. This was to beat Florida. This was to beat a team that's won 3 national championships in the last 20 years, a team that was a number 1 seed this season, that was the defending champion, and to knock them off in Tampa in that fashion. And then the story with his mom there for just the second time this season as she came to Florida to watch them play here in the NCAA tournament. So many great moments out of that one. Absolutely love it.
College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Build any college hoops parlay you want. You want to pick a bunch of underdogs, take some favorites. You want to mix and match, mix spreads, totals, player props, however you see the slate playing out. Then add that parlay profit boost and instantly bump up that potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride the team you've been following all season if they're lucky enough to still be in it. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Kansas lost in the round of 32 to Rick Pitino and St. John's thanks to a buzzer beater from the Red Storm, and there's a lot of question marks now in Kansas going into the offseason. Derek Johnson has the recap and looks ahead on Locked On Jayhawks.
Kansas season is over after a 67-65 loss to St. John's. It was an incredible comeback to tie it up. And then, I don't know, in some ways, a very not fitting ending in terms of like we've seen some of these other big comebacks that they were able to complete. In another way, a fitting ending because of everything that went down in this game, including at the very end when Elmarco Jackson subs back in for Cole Rosario, who is playing actually very well for KU and gives up a straight line drive to the rim for an easy bucket. So we're going to break it all down on today's episode. What is next for KU now that the season is over? We'll get into the moments of the game here and what just went wrong for KU today, but really all season long that kind of led us to this point. So I guess if you missed the game, it was a stinker of a game, to say the least, like kind of a gross game. Neither team shot well from the floor, except St. John's did shoot pretty well from three. And KU was losing all the possession game. And then all of a sudden, like St. John's built a big lead. And at one point in the end of the first half, it's like, oh, KU's not playing well, but they're only down one. And then St. John's builds an 8-point lead at the half. And then they get up as much as I think it was 14 at one point. And then KU starts mounting a comeback. They chip away, and then they go on a big run in the final handful of minutes in the game. And Darren Peterson hits those two clutch free throws after Cole Rosario makes some really big plays for KU down the stretch and ties it at 65. And then KU has all these fouls to give, and they work the clock down to 3.9 seconds, and they allow for St. John's, Dylan Darling, who I believe that is his only points of the game. He was 0 for 4 before that, to just drive straight to the rim and get an easy layup right before the buzzer. And that was an infuriating finish to what was a good comeback and otherwise a crappy game, I guess would be the way of kind of putting that. And a lot went into this loss for KU, right? All season long, we talked about the possession game that KU was losing. The KU was giving up extra shots and possessions to their opponent. Well, St. John's put up 69 field goal attempts. They had 34 two-point shots, 35 three-point attempts. KU had 54. Right, so they're getting 15 extra field goals. And yes, you do shoot 6 more free throws. But that doesn't make up for the entirety of it. The big reason why you actually did okay on their offensive rebounding. They had 2 more offensive rebounds than you because you got a flurry of them kind of late in the game. The biggest difference why was because you had 8 more turnovers than them, right? It's a two-way street. One, KU was horrible at just inbounding the basketball, just throwing the ball away, unforced turnovers, throwing passes where it was like a guy was open on a lob to throw down a dunk, that they had been making those passes for years now, and we're just throwing it off the backboard or throwing it away. The turnovers were the biggest deal. But all season long, we talked about how KU was not forcing turnovers. And so in a game where you turned the ball over 16 times, this Kansas team never all season long was forcing. They had 3 steals this game. And so you're not able to be like, okay, well, we had 16 turnovers, but we forced 14 from them to try to mitigate it a little bit. You did not mitigate it. They dominated you in the turnover department, and that led to them having a big advantage in terms of the shot volume. And that's what ends up mattering, what ends up being a 2-point game, is that and the 3-point shooting difference. And, you know, they end up only shooting 31% from 3, actually, but when it counted, they were making them, and the volume and the made threes mattered. And for KU, through the first half of the game, the only player who had made a 3 in March Madness for Kansas was Darren Peterson. And then, you know, in the second half, obviously Melvin Council ends up making one, Cole Rosario ends up making one. But all of those things kind of came back to haunt KU. And then, you know, what have we seen as well from KU? Like Trey White has been very show or no show for KU. There's been some awesome Trey White games this year. There's been some complete no shows. And this was one of those no shows from Trey White. Same thing for Bryson Tiller. There were some awesome moments from Tiller this year. Complete no show here. You get 26 minutes of 0 points, 5 rebounds for Bryson Tiller. Like, you had no shows from 2 of your 5 starters. And then Elmarco Jackson, you know, had a very Elmarco Jackson game. And obviously the moment at the end of the game, but also it's the missed dunk, it's the turnovers. And like, to a certain standpoint, you almost got what you expected, but it still rips your heart out because of the comeback and because it still is finality with the NCAA tournament. And all of those things come together. And then I do think there's an element here of okay, obviously the crappy offense, like that was kind of a thing all year long, and that came to play in this one, especially for the first, 35 minutes of the game. Foul trouble for Flory, that had been kind of a thing this year, and that was kind of a story through the game, and obviously forced him to play a little bit less minutes in the first half of the game, and that had an impact. So you're looking at those things that are themes of the season coming into play here. And then I also think this, like, for years now, people have been barking at Bill Self to, let the young guys, let the guys further on the bench get a little bit more run in the early part of the season to try to give them more time on the court to develop. And all NCAA tournament long, you were hearing with KU missing all these shots and struggling offensively and yada, yada, yada. Why is Cole Rosario not getting run? Or they bring up the Jaden Dawson quote from senior day about, hey, this guy's going to win us a game coming up here. And obviously that didn't end up happening. And you see how Paul Mbia played in this game. Like, Paul Mbia was, again, very good for Kansas off the bench. He was good against Cal Baptist. He was good in this game. Cole Rosario was awesome for Kansas in this game. He hits the three. He gets a couple offensive rebounds that, one, he was probably out of bounds, but that led to Kansas mounting the comeback. Like, Cole was really good in this one, and he is one of KU's better offensive rebounders. And you see those guys playing well in this situation, and it's a little bit of like, wait, why weren't they getting more run earlier, and why weren't they more in the rotation now? And did that come back to bite Kansas once again here in this late setting? I think that's a very fair question, along with all of those other things that we've kind of brought up here. And just in general, like, you see the mistakes that we saw all season long come back into the mistakes of this game, but it's also it's a personnel offseason thing too. Like, I continue to bang the drum on the idea Kansas needs a GM. If Bill Self's going to be the head coach, like, I don't know if he'll retire or not. They need a GM, because this is 3 straight seasons where you have not had enough shooters on the floor. Now, if Cole Rosario struggled with his shot the first part of the season, and it's one thing about, okay, you went 5 of 14 from 3. That's 36%. You'd be like, is that really the issue? You only shot 14 threes. That's not modern era basketball. And it's really coming from one guy. 8 of the 14 attempts came from one dude and Darren Peterson. 3 of the 5. So you made 9 3-pointers over the course of your 2 NCAA tournament games. 7 of them came from one dude. It just makes it so much harder, or so much easier for the opponent to defend you, because they only have to key on one guy from 3. That's really how this Kansas team has been for the last, you look at last year's team, it was like, okay, well, when Rylan Griffin's on there, but he kind of tanked his shooting at the end of the season. It's like, it's pretty much Zeke Mayo as your shooter on the floor. Year before that, it was supposed to be Nick Timberlake, but it just wasn't. You have to get more shooters on your team. And this is one of the results of not being able to have that. So there's a lot of mistakes that go into this, from the personnel decisions to things we saw all season long to some things that were just crap luck. St. John's making 11 threes, their new season high, shooting their new season high. That was a little bit of crap luck. Now, again, some of those were, you left them too open. So sometimes you're going to get burned with that. So it's kind of a combination of everything. It's a combination of things you haven't done well this year with things that come up that don't always come up. And the rotation stuff. And, if we are to say some of the biggest positives to springboard off this game to the future, you could say, hey, if Cole Rosario comes back, you like the final flavor you saw from him. If Paul Mbia comes back, I'm saying if, not because I know something, just if, because in today's day and age with the transfer portal, you just never really know. But that, I feel good about Paul Mbia being the backup big who can give you 10 to 12 minutes off the bench next season. And I do feel, I'm happy that Melvin Council finished the game strong. The early part of the game was bad for Melvin Council. He finished the game, the end of the first half and the second half, he was actually good from then on, which makes me feel better, because he will still be a beloved player for me, and I think a lot of KU fans. But yeah, I mean, for like Trey White, that is a tough way to go out. He's had a lot of those ups and downs. For Bryson Tiller, it becomes interesting from the standpoint of that's a tough way to go out on the season. So tough of a way, not just this game, but the end of the year in general for him, that it makes you question and wonder, will he even be back? Will Kansas meet whatever the price is for him to come back, or will he want a fresh start somewhere else? But I guess those are things we can talk about in some of the offseason stuff for KU. The bottom line is this: KU has now lost 5 of their last 6 second-round games. And in a majority of them that they've lost, this was more of the Arkansas ilk, where you lost a close game late. A lot of those other ones have been blowouts. And now by the time the calendar turns to March of 2027, that means Kansas will only have one Sweet 16 since 2018 by the time we get to 2027. It's just not enough for what this program is and needs to be. And yes, I have very serious questions about if the guy in charge right now can put together that roster with enough offense, with enough shooting in this new era and deal with NIL and all of these transfer portal things. But I've been saying for 2 years that they need a GM, and it just hasn't happened whatsoever. So should be a very interesting offseason in Lawrence in what finishes as, I would say, a fun season for a lot of it, a not fun final month, and a disappointing finish and disappointing result for what this season ended up being.
Kentucky fell in the second round of the NCAA tournament after losing to Iowa State. The loss ends a disappointing season as a whole for the Blue Blood Wildcats, and Lance Daw goes over all of it on Locked On Kentucky.
This has been an emotional roller coaster of a season. This has been an up and down, chaotic, overall very negative season. It feels like, just because of the injuries, the pacing of it, some really confusing moments from Pope, from this team. Obviously, they had that big run there in the middle of the season where they won 8 of 9, and then they fall down the stretch, just collapse. They win 2 games in the SEC tournament, shouldn't have been in that position in the first place, and then they lose to Florida again in a really poor shooting effort. They beat Santa Clara in one of the best games I've seen in my life. Otega Owe has his best performance as a Wildcat, and then after one solid half, honestly, I would say one solid 15 minutes of game time against Iowa State, the Wildcats crumble. They crumble. And again, like I mentioned, this contest felt like a bit of a microcosm of what we've been experiencing as fans emotionally, and frankly, what the team has been experiencing this entire season, where it starts off well, like you have these hopes, these aspirations, and then it all is kind of taken away from you there. And yes, I understand that Kentucky had some great games where they found ways to come back. They rallied. You could argue that Kentucky should consistently not be in those spots. I think I would agree with you, but nevertheless, they found ways to win. This was an interesting team for sure, especially considering the fact that they didn't have a point guard for the large portion of this year. Literally did not have a point guard healthy on the roster able to play. And the bench, whenever Kentucky did get thin towards the end of the year, was virtually unplayable. And then you got to see maybe some bright spots, some from Cam Williams, some Mohamed Diabate bright spots here late. But still overall, just a very underwhelming season for Kentucky and Mark Pope in his second year. It kind of completely erases, in my mind, the honeymoon that was in year one. Obviously, you have to give him some grace for the amount of injuries that Pope has had to deal with. You also have to begin to question, what is this strength and conditioning staff doing with some of these kids at the same time? Whenever you have a dislocated shoulder over and over and over again, you have something like Jaden Quaintance, where why did you make the decision to even bring him onto this team when he provided nothing for you? He gave you one win over St. John's, and really how much of an impact was that at the end of the day? Just some bad decisions, I think, in terms of roster construction from Pope and this staff. There just weren't enough shooters, weren't enough ball handlers, weren't enough playmakers on this team. I do want to give credit to Otega. We will do that later in the show. I want to give him his flowers and thank him for coming back this season, because he didn't have to. He did not have to return this season. He could have gone to the NBA draft and he could have found hay there as a professional ball player, but he didn't. He stuck around, and I do appreciate him for that. But this team was just, this iteration of Kentucky will be generally forgotten, in my opinion, just kind of forgotten as just another squad outside of, save a couple of insane buzzer beaters, right? Which I think people will look back on and forget that they happened this year. I think you'll think about that Malachi Marino shot against LSU, where Kentucky comes back to win it at the end. I think you'll obviously think about Owe's performance against Santa Clara. That is etched into March Madness lore forever, and Kentucky's history books as well. So you'll think about those two things, but you won't really remember anything else from the season other than, and the average person watching college basketball will think, oh yeah, that team, they spent $22 million on their roster, and they were disappointing relative to expectations. They were a bad team relative to expectations. And honestly, Iowa State, I mean, credit to them. This is a phenomenal team. The Cyclones are really, really, really good. And they played today without Joshua Jefferson. They're All-American, and they still found a way to grind out the first half, to hold serve, and then to absolutely blow Kentucky out of the water in the second, scoring 51 points in the second period. Just an embarrassing meltdown from Kentucky. And this is what we've said all season. This has been a consistently mentally weak team, or if you punch them hard enough, they will stay down. They get rattled really easily. Yes, I know they had moments where they rallied, but overall, you look against teams that are good, against competent elite competition that Kentucky wants to find themselves competing against consistently, winning against consistently. Florida, Gonzaga, freaking Louisville, I think you could throw into this group just because of how big of a rival they are. Yes, I know what happened in the NCAA tournament, but still, I think they fall in that category as well. Against teams like this, an Iowa State caliber, a top 10 caliber team, Kentucky gets down and they sort of fall apart. They just embarrass themselves. It's a lack of physicality. It's a lack of depth because of the injuries. It's a lack of maturity. It's a lack of playmaking. It's a lack of a lot of things. So again, like I mentioned, and we'll get into it a little bit more, there's a lot of things that Pope's going to have to do to change what he had going on this season, because I think he overcorrected. Yes, Kentucky's defense last season wasn't up to snuff. This season, a little bit better, but again, like you can't stray away from your identity to that extent. And I think that he's got to find some sort of middle ground, some happy agreement between we're going to have a high octane, fly up and down the floor 3-point shooting team, and we're going to be a little bit more defensive minded, try and be more athletic. I'll just go ahead and tell you, this team was supposed to be more athletic. They were supposed to be more physical. They were supposed to be faster. And they were none of those things relative to last year's team. I would take last year's squad over this year's squad in 8 of 10 games that they play. This was just an embarrassment on that front for the University of Kentucky. This is not what we expect out of our program. This is not the standard. The type of personnel that Kentucky had on their team this season, you root for them, you cheer for them, you want them to succeed. But at the end of the day, these kids are being compensated for their performance at the University of Kentucky, and they will be justly criticized. There's been a lot of conversation online about some things to do with Malachi Marino and his family. I don't condone that. I think that is embarrassing. I think that's pathetic to do as a human being. At the end of the day, these are kids. This is a college sport. At the same time, if you're going to be paid millions of dollars, there is a level of criticism that comes with that. There is a standard. And I think the players know that. I think the players would agree with that. But it doesn't shake the fact that they still deserve the criticism for a lot of bad things that happened this year. I mean, just some dumbfounding mistakes by this team throughout the course of this season. And then it kind of culminates again, talk about that word, microcosm of the season in the second half against Iowa State, where we'll get to the officiating. We'll get to some of that in a second. But this was Kentucky's game to lose after the way that they played in the first half, and they completely fell apart. They didn't have anything else in the tank. They didn't have anything else in the tank. Mental mistakes compounded by the fact that Iowa State just has one of the best defenses in the nation, incredible ball pressure, incredible effort, incredible performance from that team today. But I also will mention, I will throw this out there. And I want to be clear because it is incredible to me. It is absolutely incredible to me how you can make your stance abundantly clear on how a game played out. You can make a comment about officiating, and there will be a host of people online that somehow find a way to completely remove from their brain the fact that they just heard you say officiating's not the reason why Kentucky lost this game. And they will immediately go to cry more, shut up about officiating, it's not why you lost. Why are you talking about officiating? It's not like saying like you can't blame officiating for the reason why you lost. And they completely ignore somehow in a beautiful way the first statement that comes out of my mouth, your mouth, anybody else's mouth that says officiating is not the reason why Kentucky lost this game. It does not excuse it from the fact that it was poor.
College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Build any college hoops parlay you want. You want to pick a bunch of underdogs, take some favorites. You want to mix and match, mix spreads, totals, player props, however you see the slate playing out. Then add that parlay profit boost and instantly bump up that potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride the team you've been following all season if they're lucky enough to still be in it. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. One of the cooler names in the NBA, Bones Highland, led the Timberwolves to a win over the Celtics in Boston last night. Ben Beacon recaps a 10-point road win on Locked On Wolves.
The way the Timberwolves won this game is very unlike how the Wolves have won many games this year. However, it is the recipe for the antless Minnesota Timberwolves to win, and we talked about this a little bit last week with wins over Phoenix and Utah, and it's the recipe, it's the formula for a Timberwolves team with no Anthony Edwards to win, especially post-trade deadline with Ayo Dosunmu and Bones Highland in the regular rotation. That's where I want to start today, because this game started out extremely ugly for the Wolves, and this is my first of my three big things. Often on the post-game pod, I'll hit my three big things. We'll get into studs and duds at the end of the show and hit a couple other stuff here in the middle. But my first of my three big things is the pace and the turning and the defense turning defense into offense, really, is what the Timberwolves did so well. We'll talk about some of the offensive issues here in a minute, but Minnesota had just 14 points in the first quarter. And actually, we'll also talk about the defense later. It's all linked, right? But what got the Timberwolves going in the second quarter, they scored 14 first quarter points, and they scored 33 in the second. So they ended up with a respectable 47 points by halftime and I think a 3-point lead at halftime over the Celtics. And yeah, it was a 3-point lead because it was a Bones Highland buzzer beater at the end of the second quarter that gave them the 3-point cushion. But the antless Minnesota Timberwolves cannot be a half-court pound the rock team. They can't simply run offense through Julius Randle. And they tried. That's how they opened this game. And of course, Boston called their bluff and said, all right, you're going to do that. We're going to double Julius Randle and bet that he's going to make the wrong play. We're going to bet that he shoots a tough fall away with two guys on him, or he's going to try to jump pass to the opposite corner, or he's, going to stand there for 12 seconds and dribble the ball and give somebody else a hand grenade, right? And they were correct. The Timberwolves scored 14 points in the first quarter. There was no ball movement. There was nothing that led you to believe that the Timberwolves were going to be able to score at any reasonable in any reasonable cadence in this game. Thankfully, we'll talk about Rudy in a little bit. Gobert was great early on in this game defensively, and the Timberwolves half-court defense was very good, and Boston only scored 23 points themselves. So it was 23-14 at the end of the first quarter. But in the second quarter, the defense ratcheted up to a level that it then generated offense for Minnesota. And it was Ayo Dosunmu and it was Bones Highland that were the two guys that did this the best. Dosunmu obviously starting in the absence of Anthony Edwards, but Bones Highland, a huge part of this off the bench. And I don't think I never thought that I would mention Bones Highland in defense in a positive way in the same phrase or same, I guess, group of sentences. I shouldn't say that. Bones has competed defensively more often than not this season. He's still a minus defender, but the effort level on defense has been, I think, really good for the most part for Bones Highland this season. And that's not necessarily what I was expecting. It's not necessarily what his reputation was before he came to Minnesota. But he was part of the swarming defense. I thought Dante DiVincenzo had some good minutes there. And I know, again, he's struggling from the field still. But I thought he played pretty well defensively and was part of this push. And then, Naz, we'll talk more about Naz because he was later in the game. I thought his best minutes were in the fourth quarter. But Dosunmu part of it as well. He, being the starter that bridged the gap effectively to this defensive unit that was like, kind of like bats out of hell. Like that's really what it was. It was pressuring the ball. It was saying, look, we know we don't really have a point guard, but the Celtics don't really either. I mean, Derek White plays point guard for them and Peyton Pritchard kind of plays point guard for them, but neither of them are really traditional point guards. Derek White is maybe a little bit more that way, but that's not he's not, right? Like, they don't play with a quote unquote traditional point guard, which, by the way, I have to point out the irony in that, because that's something that and I get Jason Tatum obviously functions as a point guard when he's fully healthy and all that stuff, but he's still working his way back. But there's irony in Bill Simmons on the Simmons show he always talks about the Timberwolves don't have a point guard, and that's why it's tough for him to buy in. The Celtics don't really have a point guard either, and obviously the Celtics being Simmons' favorite team. Anyway, that's an aside. But the pressure that the Wolves put on the ball was really effective. And you could see it. They got under the skin of Tatum. They got under the skin of Jaylen Brown. The officials, to their credit and to the Wolves' benefit, allowed them to play. I mean, there were only 33 combined free throws in this game. And that was a big benefit for Minnesota. And they got under the skin of the guys handling the ball for the Celtics. They actually only got 7 steals in this game, but they were timely. And they also sped up the Celtics offense. They caused Boston to be in a place where they didn't necessarily want to be offensively. And that then led to easy buckets the other way. And I said this quite a bit last week, early in the week, before the Antless games against Phoenix and Utah. But like, it was even more clear after those games, and perhaps even more clear after the Wolves lost to Portland on Friday. But Boston's dead last in pace. Like, Boston doesn't want to play fast. Minnesota, especially without Anthony Edwards, needs to play fast. Turning defense into offense is the way that the Timberwolves are going to win without Anthony Edwards. It's the way they're going to generate offense. And so by ratcheting up that defensive pressure, like, this is a Boston team that came in top, depending on where you look, I mean, top, no matter where you look, top 3 offensively in terms of offensive rating. And you know, healthy this side of obviously Jason Tatum, not normal Jason Tatum, but we're, back. Jaylen Brown was dinged up. I think he was listed as probable for this game. Obviously Vucevic out, but he's only been on the team for a few weeks anyway. Vucevic, excuse me. But the otherwise a healthy Celtics team. That's a really good offensive team, a top 3 offensive team. And what did Minnesota do? They sped them up. They ratcheted up the pressure. It led to a couple of easy buckets the other way, but it also caused them to be a little bit uncomfortable offensively. And that led to some easy buckets for Minnesota. And then that led to some confidence and some secondary break opportunities that don't go into the box score as fast break points. And that's something I talk about a lot on the show because I think it gets lost. Minnesota only was credited with 22 fast break points, the Celtics 17 in this game, if you look at the official box score. But how many secondary break opportunities were the Wolves getting because of the pressure they were putting on the ball, because of the physicality they were playing with? And I thought that was huge for the Timberwolves to get their offense rolling. And that's what, I mean, there was that Io run, was that third quarter where he just went crazy. There was like there was the 7-0 Bones run, which was actually the Io run was second quarter. The Bones run was third quarter. The Jaden run was third quarter. The Bones run was fourth quarter. It was really like a player a quarter. But in the second quarter, I had assumed we had like a 5-0 burst himself where he had a crazy steal. He had a bucket in the lane. He had a 3-pointer. Very impressive run from Ayo Dosunmu that was kind of at the height of this defense into offense push. And like, it was just vital to what the Timberwolves were doing. And it's what turned this game on its head. I mean, like Minnesota, after scoring just 14 points in the first quarter, at one point they were down by 15 points in this game. I think it was early second quarter. They were down 15 and they turned things around very quickly because of the defense that they played. And that's how this team needs to play. Leaning into Ayo Dosunmu, leading into Bones Highland, leading into, to an extent, and these guys weren't great in transition, save for Jaden in the third quarter, but Dante DiVincenzo, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, who obviously was great in all facets, really, in the fourth quarter of this game. But all those guys together without Anthony Edwards know they've got more shots, and they know they're going to touch the ball more often, and they have to lean into that by playing faster.
College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Build any college hoops parlay you want. You want to pick a bunch of underdogs, take some favorites, you want to mix and match, It's mixed spreads, totals, player props, however you see the slate playing out. Then add that parlay profit boost and instantly bump up that potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride the team you've been following all season if they're lucky enough to still be in it. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. The Celtics lost to the Timberwolves in Boston despite 29 points from Jaylen Brown, and John Corrales has the Boston side of the matchup at TD Garden on Locked On Celtics.
Let's start at the top, though. Minnesota wins this thing by 10, and it was all about the physicality. To me, the beginnings, middle, and end of this game, the story is just how physical they were. And I'm calling it maybe the most physical game the Celtics have played all year. But I'm not sure that it's the same kind of physicality that maybe the Detroit Pistons brought to Boston. You know, my mouth sometimes doesn't want to work. But what Minnesota did, they just grabbed and pushed and banged, and they did everything they could. It wasn't just physical basketball. They were handsy. They were disruptive. They really tested the limit of you can't call it all type of basketball, which the Celtics have been known to do themselves very much. So you know it when you see it. And they very much disrupted the Celtics all night long. And I think it was one of the very first things that we saw, especially Julius Randle. I forget who. I was listening to somebody on a podcast recently, and they were like, Julius Randle is the most physical basketball player in the NBA. And you could see it. You could see it in this game. And even though he didn't score a bunch, you could feel his presence. You can feel him defensively. So yeah, the Timberwolves came in and just knocked the Celtics around. First quarter, third quarter, the Celtics were okay when they had their starters in there, Tatum, Kata, Brown, White, Hauser. That group was okay. The second and fourth quarters, the groups that the Celtics were throwing out there were not good. And that's where the Timberwolves kind of made their runs. The Celtics won the first quarter 23-14. They lost the second quarter 33-21. They won the third quarter 33-29. They lost the fourth quarter 26-15. That fourth quarter was some of the worst basketball you're going to see out of the Boston Celtics. Not only 15 points, but just couldn't live up to what Minnesota was bringing. And Jaylen Brown said it after the game. The Celtics weren't playing Celtics basketball. Minnesota set the tone, and the Celtics just didn't respond. Now, there's some discussion about, well, when they were coming back from Memphis, they had a plane malfunction, and they were delayed for like 4 hours, and they didn't get in till 7:00 in the morning, and it just kind of threw them off. And yeah, that could be disruptive. But again, the Celtics had a lead up to 15 in this game. They had moments where they were playing well. It's just they didn't do it consistently. The bench units weren't good enough. And one mitigating factor in all of this is there were stretches there where the Celtics went without Tatum and Brown on the floor. And I think ultimately one of those guys will be on the floor at all times whenever Tatum's minute restriction is up. So the question really is, will that happen at some point when the playoffs roll around? We're about a little less than a month from. Let me just double check this, because the Celtics regular season ends on the 12th. And so, yeah, they have that whole week. So I would say the playoffs begin 18th, 19th, 20th, somewhere in there. This is the March 23rd show. So just a touch under a month to go before the Celtics are in the playoffs. is that enough time for Tatum to get up to playoff minutes? We'll talk more about Tatum later on, but it does leave the Celtics a little bit of leeway, a little bit of growth here. I also think this could have been a good Nikola Vucevic game, because Neemias Queta was good in stretches. Luka Garza had his stretches, but neither of them was just great in this game. And I feel like this would have been a perfect game for that, Vooch is a big dude. He can play a little bit physical. Just to have that dynamic of a big guy who can shoot, and have him be just a little bit more physical, a little bit more dynamic than Luka Garza, who, did fine, but Luka Garza, the box score will tell you he had 5 offensive rebounds. Actually, no, now it said 5 before when I left the arena, and now it says 4. So they took one away. But he had 3, I think, on one possession. Maybe that's one that they took away. But either way, his offensive rebounding numbers were inflated by one possession where he had like tip in, miss, tip in, miss, tip in, miss. So to have maybe Vucevic in there for floor spacing, but also a little bit of physicality, that might have been helpful. So the Celtics weren't at their absolute best in this game, but neither were the Timberwolves. There was no Anthony Edwards in this game, so that is also their own mitigating factor. So look, the bottom line here, the most simple version of the story of this game is the Celtics got their butts kicked in the fourth quarter when Tatum and Brown weren't around in the fourth quarter. The Timberwolves just blasted them. That doesn't absolve Tatum and Brown of what they did in the second quarter, because Jaylen Brown, who had an awesome first quarter, came in the second quarter and committed 3 turnovers, tons of live ball turnovers. Celtics had 1 turnover in the first quarter, and that amounted to nothing. They had 10 turnovers in the second quarter that went for 13 Minnesota points. So in the second quarter, Minnesota scored 33 points. 13 of those were off Celtics turnovers. Now, I'm not saying that you take all of those away and the Celtics, who put up 21 points in that quarter, would have won the quarter, but they wouldn't have lost it by 12 if they just held on to the ball. They turned the ball over way too much, way too many live ball turnovers. 6 steals in the second quarter for the Timberwolves. Brutal. You're just not going to get away with that. You mix in the lack of offensive rebounding, and that becomes a recipe for disaster.
College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Build any college hoops parlay you want. You want to pick a bunch of underdogs, take some favorites. You want to mix and match, mix spreads, totals, player props, however you see the slate playing out. Then add that parlay profit boost and instantly bump up that potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride the team you've been following all season if they're lucky enough to still be in it. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. The 49ers still want to find a long-term solution to keep star lineman Trent Williams, but San Francisco chose not to go with the $10 million bonus option for next season that will make his cap hit now even bigger. The Niners hope to get a deal done at some point, but Locked On 49ers hosts Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker have all the info on the latest twist in the story.
We got to get to the latest on Trent Williams, though, first. And I knew it was going to happen. Something was going to be announced on Friday because he had an option bonus, Croc. And when you hear option bonus, there's so many, NFL contracts get so convoluted, Croc. There's so many different things. So the bonus was essentially kind of a non-factor because it wasn't like, oh, we don't pick up the bonus and now Trent Williams is gone. It was, and by the way, Adam Schefter put out the report, Friday's 4 p.m. Eastern deadline, the 49ers opting not to exercise the $10 million option bonus in Trent Williams' contract. Per sources, Williams' salary cap number now will grow to close to $47 million, but the team is not overly concerned about it and is still planning to rework his contract before next month's NFL draft. So that's where we are with Trent Williams and the San Francisco 49ers. So essentially, the option bonus was not about a declaration of his future. It was about that bonus either becoming a reverting back to base salary, which is what happened by not picking it up. If they would have picked it up, it would have been prorated over the next 4 seasons for $2.5 million per season. So essentially, it was either the option was to either have it go straight into base salary this year or be prorated for the next 4 years. And the 49ers decided not to do the prorating part of picking up the option. So that's where the 49ers are for now, but clearly are still trying to do something with Trent Williams' contract. And Trent Williams still a 49er, and I assume will remain a San Francisco 49er. But who knows? Maybe we'll see what happens in the draft, Croc. So a weight off your shoulders that Trent Williams is going to be at least sticking around through that option bonus date that was March 20th.
What was Saturday? I was on the NFL radio show, and anybody that listened to me know that came up, that topic, and they were like, hey, man, what's going on with Trent Williams? How's the feeling around the 49ers and the fan base? And I said, look, they do this dance every year, right? Dang near every offseason or every other offseason, they do this dance where he wants more money and they figure out a way to make it work. So I don't think that this is any different than the other years, aside from him getting a little older. 49ers old and injured, and he's older as well, one of those older players, but a terrific player that you cannot go into this season without, unless you figure out a way to replace him, which I think we'll find that answer out come draft day. If they draft a left tackle, maybe he's available to other teams. That's something that we haven't quite really talked about. The same way the 49ers got him, maybe they get him out of there as well, because it is a deeper tackle class. But if I had to bet, Trent Williams, they'll figure it out. He's the guy that Kyle Shanahan loves, the team loves. He is a staple in the 49ers offense and what they do. And you're definitely much more comfortable going into the season with him as opposed to without him, regardless of how much money he's making. So they'll get this done. It just may drag out a little bit. What you have to hope is while it's dragging out, does he get disgruntled? We've seen that with 49ers players where all of a sudden they kind of either want out or they demand to get traded and all those things. And you can fix that by giving the guy money. But I think they'll work it out pretty quick when it comes to Trent Williams.
Well, the thing is, he's got a lot of money. He's not going to get more money this year than he's already getting. So the question is, how does a restructure work? How does adding a year work and moving the salary cap numbers around and give Trent some guaranteed money? Because the one thing he doesn't have left now is guaranteed money. And maybe he wants to get some guarantees in on that and into future years. And so we'll see what happens there if Trent Williams reports to anything. But currently still well compensated is Trent Williams. In fact, will set the record by the end of his career, Croc. I don't know if you saw those numbers. Will set the record by the end of his career, very likely, of being the highest paid ever when you're talking career contracts, non-quarterback in the history of the NFL.
I get it. And there's a reason why he has that jet with that big silverback on the side of it.
I mean, that's serious business when you own your own jet. That's not screwing around. And you got to keep going into your 40s because you got to pay for that thing. And fuel's not cheap either, Croc. I can't imagine how much jet fuel is because I know you've been filling it up at the pump lately and been traveling around California because that's not cheap.
Oh, man. I mean, I can barely afford putting gas in the car. I can imagine putting gas in a jet. I mean, it's almost $6 a gallon just to put gas in a car. Like what? Yeah. That's crazy. You know, there used to be the famous song in the Bay Area. I got 5 on it. $5 isn't doing anything on the gas tank right now.
Yeah, here's almost a gallon of gas with your 5. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Where how much do you have to spend with the gas where it's at right now. If he wants to travel, right, he going on vacations with the family and all that. I mean, the price of it has to be astronomical. And I'd assume it's kind of like getting regular gas where, hey, if gas is, I don't know, $3, it's cheaper. If it's close to $6, now you're paying double. So could you imagine, fueling up a jet costing, typically if it's around $3, $3.50 per gallon, okay, it's going to cost you $20,000. And I may be way off, but okay, now it costs $40,000 one way and another 40 coming back. You're paying 80 to 100,000 just to travel somewhere. I'd rather just go commercial.
So I'm looking it up right now. Jet fuel typically costs between $4 and $8 per gallon, with often the national average around $7 per gallon. So it's not that it's that much more expensive than regular gas that you would put in your car. But based on prices vary based on location and volume, with long-range jets consuming up to 600 gallons per hour. So that's where it gets you, Croc.
I don't even want to do. I can't even do that math right now, but it sounds ridiculous.
That is nuts. Okay. A light jet might consume more like 60 to 90 gallons per hour, which I imagine is what that jet would be more. So, yeah, there you go. 100 gallons per hour, Croc, $7 per gallon. That does get pretty pricey pretty quick for flying around the country.
That's all for today's Big 6 and 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 and 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, and on campus, going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 and 30 NBA, the Big 3 and 30 NFL, or the Big 3 and 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.